This is Joshua Ray Farmer, podcast number 2. I'm here with Nicole McManus. We are going to just dive straight in. We've been friends now for a little while, and I've heard a lot about your stories, and we've talked a lot about some details about your life, and just as, just friends sharing. I've tattooed you for hours, which has led to led to lots of interesting conversations and details. But what I want to dive straight into is this thing that you're part of, which is Spartan Racing.
Yeah.
So the first thing I'm going to do is ask you about that. So
Sure.
Right into the Spartan Racing. What is a Spartan race? Like, a lot of people I know that I've even mentioned previous to this recording.
It's basically kind of a new type of racing it's obstacle course racing. So you mix in obstacles with running, typically on mountains, up a lot of hills. Obstacles can vary from flipping a tire to monkey bars to crawling under barbed wire, through mud, through, carrying large sandbags or rocks,
Right.
Pretty much whatever they want to throw at you. It's just kind of like an all-inclusive type of race. In general, like, what's supposed to test is just you as an athlete, an all-around athlete, basically. Just throw whatever it can at you and see who does it the fastest.
So there's a lot of strength. There's a lot of endurance. I'm guessing those mixed together. That's essentially what it is. But there's technique in all of that also involved with carrying things.
Oh, yeah.
You have to. If you don't know how to carry a log,
right. You
could be as strong as you want, but if you carry it wrong, it's going to put a lot more weight on you than it needs to.
Yeah, and you have to be careful with your back. I mean, we do bucket carries where you fill up a bucket of rocks and carry it. I mean, if you're not careful on how you're doing that, the small of your back's going to be killing you during it. It's going to be a struggle. So learning how to do that, there are certain obstacles that, there's something that's called a multi-rig that they're always changing, but it's always a combination of rings, bars, baseballs hanging from a rope that, you have to swing across and stuff like that. There's technique, obviously, in it. And then, I mean, for the most part, the people that are successful in it not only have the technique, but they're ridiculously fast runners, mountain runners, specifically. Wow. Trail runners. So you have to be really good with technical terrain. Downhills, going down a single track path, is not the easiest thing in the world. And a lot of mountain climbing and stuff like that is.
So this is something that happens nationwide, worldwide?
Worldwide.
Okay.
So it's on all 7 continents now. U.S. is kind of the biggest, obviously, now, but they are doing 7 countries. They're doing the kind of championships, and then there's the world championships. That's typically in Tahoe every year in September is the world championships.
So that's the big one. Which is the one that was just a few months ago?
Yeah, so it was the end of September.
Okay. The end of September every year. How long has this been around, the history of it? I'm not sure how much.
You know what? That's a great question.
Yeah.
I want to say the actual Spartan Racing, probably 5 to 7 years. It started before that. I don't know the complete history. I'd love to say that I do, but I don't. I only got into it about 3 years ago.
Okay. So, and when did you first hear about it?
About 6 months before my first race.
Wow. So you got some news or some info, or you saw something, and it just led you straight to it, and you just.
Yeah, there was a little mud run that happened locally, and it was fun. It was just rolling through mud and stuff like that. And then one of my friends, I had a tough time in my life that I was going through, and she's like, you know what you should try is Spartan Racing. So she had done, I don't know, 5 to 7 of them already. And then I started reading about it, and it's this idea of, they never released the course before, like a day before, because it's the idea of you never know what obstacles you're going to face, and you need to be able to find a way over them, basically. So come in prepared and, whatever it takes, get over an obstacle. And so I thought, in life, and especially where I was at that point in my life, obstacles can be put in front of us and we can either stop and everything halters, or you can find a way over it and say, F it, just get past it and find a way, and don't wallow in pity of it or anything like that. Just keep on going. So the idea of that really kind of grabbed a hold of me. And that's when I started training for my first race. And then after my first race, I was addicted to not only the adrenaline of it, but just the challenge, the people around. It was a whole different type of person that, you don't come across on a daily basis. I mean, we're all out there paying money to get scraped up and hurting and wanting to throw up at the finish line, and all of this sort of stuff. But you're all out there together and in the same pain.
Right. Is there some sort of, I do a lot of backpacking, and a lot of times I go places on purpose where I know I'm not going to cross too many paths with anybody. And that's kind of my whole mission, is to get out and away and unplug. But when I do cross somebody's path, as opposed to into daily life living in a city where we're all crossing paths all the time, so it's kind of like whatever, like they're broke down, they're going to, someone on the side of the road and with their cars in trouble, they're going to get a tow truck and we're fine with just passing them. As opposed to being on the trail, if somebody's broke down, you need to help them.
Oh, yeah.
You're not going to just walk right. So there's this sort of camaraderie or this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So
do
you see it like a lot of that, I'm sure, but like, what is that like during an actual race? Like, I mean, you don't want to I'm assuming if you're competing, like you don't want to compromise what you're doing to help somebody.
Yeah. And it depends on the level that you're at. When I first started, especially my first year running Tahoe, there's those people that are cramping, that are hurting. You stop, you give them, a mustard packet or a gel or something like that. You're trying to help them. That's, the open races, that's very much the case is, we're all in this together. Let's get through this, everything like that. When I transferred up to running elite and competing, there is obviously a different side of it. I run with typically kind of, for the most part, the same girls. So I've came to know them really well. And, we all are friends at the start line. We're all buddies. We all joke and laugh, but we all also know it's a race. I mean, we are racing for money. We're racing for placement. So when we're headed off the start line, I mean, we all are in the knowledge that we are racing each other. We're not going to be mean about it, obviously, but if you're going through a mud pit and you splash the person next to you in the eye, it's part of the race, and they know that, if you get an elbow during it, it's not a purposeful elbow. It's just the course of racing, and then everybody, if you pass somebody or vice versa, if they pass you, most of the time they're like, good job, keep it up, always very supportive. But at the end of the day, we are racing.
It is a competition.
Yeah. At the finish line, we can all hug. We can all be best of friends again. But on the course, you are, all competing. It's, part of it. So there's two different aspects of the Spartan racing. Most people do the open, where it is more of the camaraderie thing. And then there is the other side of it that's the competing. So there's kind of two different sides, and it just depends on what you want out of the race, honestly, what you're after.
And do you think it's, is it all the same race? It's the same course for both aspects of it, meaning like you're racing with people who just want to complete it, and you're also racing the same course and the same start time as the people who want to compete.
No, so most of the time, all of the time, the elites start first. So it's the elites go on the course first. We wear armbands where we get disqualified if we get any help on any obstacles. A lot of times they'll throw at it, instead of one sandbag, we have to carry two sandbags, rather than the open class that they have wave times after us. We'll just do one sandbag, and then you can help whoever if you can't get over an 8-foot wall, you can get 5 people to help you over the wall. If you can't lift something, you can get help. You can get somebody can give you a boost on the monkey bars, and stuff like that.
Right.
So it's technically the same course. It's just
different rules.
Yeah.
Okay.
Apply basically.
And a lot of people, these races get big. Like I saw some photographs of the last event that you were at from different friends and from yourself that I saw thousands of people, it seemed like.
Oh yeah. Sometimes some races, it can go from 5,000 to 10,000 people that are racing that weekend.
Wow.
And it's a lot. Yeah. It's quite a production. And, so there's obviously different release times. People, do multiple laps sometimes and stuff like that. But there's quite a turnout on these.
And I think there was just one that, and they don't just do these outdoors, or they don't always do these just in the mountains where there's hills to climb necessarily. They get pretty creative with.
Yeah, they do a stadium series too. So the majority of them are out on the trails and stuff like that. But then they started doing stadium series where either it be like Dodger Stadium or AT&T in San Francisco, where you run every stair of that stadium. And within that, you do obstacles. They're a little bit different. Stuff like ball slams, box jumps, and stuff like that. So it's a little bit different obstacles. Those are some fast races right there. They're quick. Most of the elites are finishing within 20 minutes.
Oh wow.
So it's a sprint.
And so it's probably a little more intense because it's a shorter amount of time
right.
to really push you, as opposed to something that may last hours.
Exactly. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I got to ask, what is, I know for me to push myself athletically, if there's something I'm interested in doing, a lot of times my motive is simply just to get away. Like me, and I would think something like this with the Spartan races, because I've even been suggested. The first time I heard about one, somebody was suggesting, based off of my own personal behavior, that I would be interested in one. And I generally looked it up and realized not really, because it's a race, it's competitive in it. And I'm very competitive with myself. So I know that if I was in that environment, I'd be competitive. But I just have zero interest in being around groups of people or being involved in it. Because, my objective, again, is to kind of get away, have some solace when I'm doing anything athletic. So for you, assuming there's some history, and I know a little bit about it, growing up and stuff. You grew up in the mountains, you grew up in the foothills of the Sierra Nevadas. So what kind of led, is there some, let's say, 12-year-old you or young you that, where did this start? Where could you see that something like this was probably in your future?
Well, it's one of those things that I kind of have two different sides to my personality of the kind of just the being outside and being on trails. And that's why I also do on the flip side, I do trail racing and trail runs too. I love the just being outside on a trail and running. So the training aspect of the Spartan, I love it separately, just because I don't really like to run with people that much. Honestly, I like to be out on a trail for hours. Whether it be running, if I can only fit in an hour, or if I can be out there for 8 hours, awesome. I just like to run and be out there. And there's a peacefulness within that. And then there's the addiction to adrenaline side too, that, on that start line, it is just something that is so addicting that I love. And it's not for everybody, obviously. Not everybody has the same kind of competition, sort of thing, but that I get to kind of, put aside the nice, what society wants you to be, this nice, sweet person. And you just kind of almost go into animalistic, it's almost like a throwback of, survival and just grit, I guess. Grit is kind of that thing that a lot of these racers refer to, that, that you kind of have to have in doing this to yourself, right. Purposefully and paying to do this to yourself. So it's kind of I have the two different sides that I love the peacefulness, but I also love the raw nature of racing too.
So when you were younger, there has to be some sort of roots. Like I know that you were athletic,
Right?
when you were younger. What were some of the things you got to enjoy as a kid?
So, I mean, I pretty much did almost every sport that was possible. For the most part, the thing that I loved the most was ski racing. I always, started skiing when I was 3 or 4, and then stopped when I was 15 or so. But through that, I played soccer. I played soccer in college too, and just basically anything that meant athletics, I wanted to do. So I'm like, if you want cross country, I get to race. Sure. Swimming, I get to race. Sure. If it means tennis, yes, I'll do that. Volleyball, yes, I'll do that.
So you were doing a lot, and that lasted all throughout your school years?
Yeah.
All the way into high school, it was just athletics. Was that like a big part of like the family life, or was that like?
Yeah. So my sister and I are only a year and a half apart, and she's my best friend. We kind of do everything together, and she's a very athletic person too. And so we always, with the racing, whether it be, going to volleyball stuff, we're going together. 'Cause she's into it too. And it was just, my sister, I, and my mom, it was just kind of it was the three of us going everywhere. So it was just kind of part of the family dynamic of that's what we did.
And so you were showing signs of competitiveness early on, and obviously the athletic part. I mean, you can be competitive, I think, in pretty much any arena of life. There's, just not just athletics, but you were showing both.
Yeah.
So that's, and so as a kid, is there a huge difference on what you get out of it, growing up as opposed to, now you're a mother of 2. So it's a totally different environment.
Sure.
But sort of like, is there any sort of like transfer overs of like, what you got out of it as a kid to now, or is it just kind of just satisfying that competitive need? Is like, what's changed from, playing soccer, volleyball in school, or what's even, maybe not even changed, but what's, crossed over into as an adult, like the similarities or what you've brought into it?
Yeah. And so there's a ton of similarities, obviously, with the competitive side and everything like that. I wouldn't say, even though I did a lot of sports, I wouldn't say I was extremely successful at a lot of sports growing up. It's one of those that, I'll make the team, I'll be in the middle of the pack, sort of thing, but I love doing it. Now it's kind of funny, as an adult, you kind of own your training a lot more. You kind of, I feel a lot more in control of how I train for something. I don't have a specific practice to go to that I get out whatever, is teach to me and stuff like that. I train myself. Right. Obviously I have help in some of those aspects. But it's up to me to do with it what I want and what I can. So with the success that I have had with it, I feel even that much more, how do I say it? Pride in it, because it was me that did it. It was me that pushed myself to be out there training and to do all of that sort of stuff, rather than in sports earlier. It's not quite the same gratification, I guess you would say.
And so with some of the success you've had, I'd like to get into that because I would say it was a few months ago we finished one of the last tattoo that I did on you. I don't know if we had finished it, or we were halfway through. It was 2 big sessions, I believe.
Yeah.
But you had mentioned that you had just completed your last race in Tahoe. And again, I was completely naive to any of this. And again, the extent of it was really looking at your Instagram and seeing the photos of you throwing spears to running up mountains and carrying heavy things. And I just think to myself, that girl's nuts. But
most people do.
Yeah. It's great. And so then, the last time I met you, or the last time we got together, you were talking to me about the race and whatnot. And I think it took like an hour, 2 hours for you to mention that like you would like actually qualified, or not qualified, but you had placed. Well, I think you first do have to qualify, right?
Yeah. Yes.
And then you placed in the last race in September 2017 in Tahoe, and which you're saying is the World Championships, at which all things I believe you failed to mention right away. I kind of had to dig it out of you, which is probably my favorite part of the story, just because I like that sort of humility, that sort of humbleness. Like, I just appreciate it. But tell me about that. Like, start with actually, let's start with the end to the beginning. Like, what was the race in September, and you placed in it? Like, tell me a little bit about that.
Sure. So, in the course of Spartans, there's a lot of different lengths of courses, going from, it can be, 5 miles to what's called an ultra beast. An ultra beast is going to be 28 plus miles and 60 plus obstacles. Tahoe is the world championships of both the beast and the ultra beast. So this course was 35 miles and 70 obstacles with 9,000 feet of elevation gain. And that's what I placed third in the worlds at. Wow. Is that ultra beast. And I ran the beast the day before that was half of the course. So within the 2 days, it was like 50 some odd miles, and yeah, a lot.
through some incredibly, obviously we mentioned tough terrain. That's to me, that's insane. First off, it's incredibly impressive, but then even me, I just tend to think like, how I couldn't imagine how your body or mind would feel before, during, or after. I would have zero clue. I mean, I'm going to guess that's, a big part of why you do it, but with placing third, that's a huge deal in a world, championship of something that's so brutal. And you were talking about earlier, having that grit, you definitely have to. It's almost kind of like, I relate it to best I can going to boot camp, but worse, because it's like in one day.
Yeah.
So that's intense.
I mean, it's one of those things that what was funny is the day before on Saturday when I did the beast, that kind of broke me more than the next day. The next day I kind of went into it with almost like a calmness of I'm just going to go out and do what I love and climb mountains. And there's a lot of elevation gain. I'm good with hills. I'm good with climbing. And so I'm just going to keep climbing and just keep going. And I didn't start out the race in front. I started out actually, kind of towards the back of the pack. And it was just, keep my endurance going. And as time went on, people started to wear out, and I just kept going at my same pace. So there's like two 17.5 laps or 17.5 mile laps. So, and I finished both, like my first lap equaled the same time as my second lap.
Wow.
So I just was consistent through it. Yeah. And it wasn't fast, it was just consistent. I mean, it took me 12 hours to finish the race. It's a long day of racing.
Right.
and
it's,
brutal on your body. But what was funny is when I finished, I felt like I had more in the tank than I did the day before because I just took my time with it. And I have an ability on endurance. Endurance is my strength that I can, as long as I keep my nutrition, obviously, at check. I mean, there's a lot of, learning points to endurance. But if I keep that in check, I have the ability to keep going. Honestly. And that's what I've kind of been able to tap into on the longer races of just being consistent and you just keep going.
Right. And so obviously placing third, beastly, and obvious why they call it an ultra beast.
Ultra beast, yeah.
There has to be a shirt with that, right? Like
yes.
There has to be a shirt that says Ultra Beast Marathon or runner. I got
a sweatshirt, I got a shirt, I got a belt buckle that says it. That's what they give out as a belt buckle.
Yep, that's great. And so you're running these races already at high altitudes. I mean, Lake Tahoe, I'm going to assume is somewhere around between 8 and 9, maybe 10,000 feet in elevation.
Yeah, at the peak of the mountain. Yeah, absolutely.
So at 10,000 feet, for people that don't know, I mean, I've suffered from this one time in my life, but at 10,000 feet, you between 9,500 and 10,000 feet, you run the risk of altitude sickness,
right?
Which is a pretty severe thing, and it's completely debilitating. But you are already kind of battling with that. And,
Right.
or at least, that's already, a hindrance, much less the obstacle course itself. And didn't you say that when you were up there before the race or during the race, there was a disturbance with some wildlife?
Oh yeah, at the start of the Beast on Saturday, there was a very large bear at the start of the race that everybody had to kind of clear out before any of the elites could start, because there was, a bear chilling there that they had to get off the course or away from the start line before everybody started running up the mountain.
You guys entered his home.
Right.
So you had to let him do his thing before
Poor
you
thing
could
looked
start.
so scared. I felt bad.
Wow. Yeah, because it's surrounded by thousands of people.
Yes.
And it's like, hey, you guys are going to run through my house? I guess I'll just try to find a safe place to hide.
Right.
Wow, that's intense.
Yeah.
Were you worried about the bear at all?
No.
No?
No.
And so he didn't pose a threat? He wasn't?
No. I mean, the thing is that living in the mountains for as long as I, did growing up, for the most part, I mean, you always respect wildlife, but know that they're more scared of you typically than you are of them.
Right.
And you keep your distance. You be smart about it. If I see a bear, I'm not going towards it,
Yeah,
obviously.
Not gonna run towards it.
Yeah. I mean, and it's more than likely, I'm not saying in all occasions, but more than likely it's not going to come after me.
Right.
That's not its, MO.
Do you guys have any sort of pre-warnings or like briefings before a race, especially in Tahoe?
You sign a death waiver.
You do.
Yeah.
And so they're very well aware, not just of the obstacle course, issues there, but the potential danger or hazards of nature.
Right.
It could be storms, could be wildlife, could be any sort of natural or disaster in that sense.
They cover their ass with that.
Right. Yeah, I would imagine.
Yeah, they go through. I mean, it's quite a waiver that you have to sign, and it's on the bottom, it's in very bold lettering that there is a possibility of death.
Right.
I mean, whether it be, because in Tahoe you do have to also go into freezing cold water. You have to swim through a lake there that is 40 degrees. And you've been running, obviously. If you have heart issues, if you have, these are all things that you have to take into account if you do these races and know that those are possibilities.
Right. There's definitely risks.
Right.
I mean, there really is pretty much the thing you can do, but when you're pushing yourself to this sort of limit, almost 40 miles in a race and almost, or you're saying over 50 in a weekend at this sort of elevation, surrounded by nature, obviously hanging out with bears and putting yourself in this situation, there's a huge potential for issues.
Well, and last year when I ran it, I tripped down the mountain and I got a rock through my hand and had to be pulled from the course. I had to go to urgent care. And I mean, that's just part of it.
Yeah.
That like I was trying to pass somebody stupidly and tripped and tumbled down the mountain.
Right.
And that's what happens. You get pretty scraped up and you get a rock in your hand.
There you go. That's there's their title.
Right.
Yep. So there's I think because I've snooped through your Instagram and saw you throwing the spears. And then also I think next to one of those photos too, I saw one of you kneeling down with a huge grin on your face with a bloody knee and just like a scrape. It looked pretty brutal. I mean, it was definitely quite a bit of blood.
Yeah.
And you're just happy as can be with it. So the expectation of it, but there's got to also be a little bit of thrill. That adds to it, right?
It
that
does.
really does, because that's the testing of the grit.
Right.
Otherwise, if it's just in a gym with padded floors.
Right. And that's the stadium races are great and it's a whole different thing. I'm not a huge fan of the stadium races because I like the idea of, rolling under barbed wire. And if I raise my head up, I'm going to get a gouge in my head. I have to be careful about it. And just, I don't know, it's part of the risk and love to it that, that is part of it. And yeah, the picture that you're talking about, because to get through an obstacle, I needed to use my knee on a board and to get across it. And I knew I was tearing my skin off, but it was
part of the deal.
Right. If I wanted to hit that bell and not fail that obstacle, that's what I had to do. Right. And, so yeah, I was happy as can be.
Wow. And so you have, there's an article that's linked in your bio on your Instagram, which I'll mention at the end, but also tag in the comments of this podcast, but you could find yourself or people can find you at cole.spartan.
Yes, on Instagram. Mm-hmm.
And then if they go there, they can also see in the link, they can see your bio with some information there. I think it's very interesting that I think there was I said a girl who likes to climb mountains, or I don't know if that's something you titled it or if it was titled that specifically, but I liked that caption.
Yeah, it was, I think it's like OCR athlete Nicole McManus to climb mountains.
Right.
Like is the way that when they asked me for like a bio is basically how I titled it is basically to climb mountains.
Right.
And it's kind of how I view just the journey in general in like a very broad term of, kind of the progression of it, but also the fact that, I actually physically climb mountains.
Right. Yeah, because you mentioned earlier that, there is this sort of reward or at least, this thing built into you that's like part of who you are is getting over these obstacles, getting through them. You said, you talked about, getting through them and just completing them and also the sort of, the strangeness of like signing up for them, paying for them and going through that route. So climbing mountains is definitely part of your story in life. And do you think this is something you'll do forever? I mean, you really see yourself an old lady doing this?
I mean, it's one of those things that it's kind of the live in the moment sort of, I'll do it as long as I can sort of thing. It's not a make it or break it. Like my life isn't disastrous without racing. I love my life with my two young girls. And if I can't race, then it is what it is. Then I've had an amazing time doing what I'm doing. But I'll do it as long as, it's something that I want to do. As long as it's something that I'm having fun and I'm enjoying, then I'll continue it.
Right.
I mean, if it starts to not be fun, if it's more quote unquote work than it is fun, then I just won't do it anymore. I mean, it's that simple. It's not something that I'm out making a huge amount of money on. I'm actually spending a lot of money. Right. Even with sponsorships and stuff like that, you spend a lot of money doing it. But it's something that if you enjoy it, then you enjoy it. And so, I'll probably always, or as long as I can, be a runner and love to run on trails and stuff like that. Obstacle course racing or competing at the level that, like I do and hope to continue to even get better at, obviously. Right. I don't know how long that'll last, but.
So let's say you lose the flair for the competition part. Do you still see yourself climbing mountains and still not necessarily pushing yourself to like see, how much grit you do have, but just enjoying that sort of outdoor fulfillment and just, even if it's just walking a trail, do you see that as being something useful to you? Or is it really just if you can't run it and you can't carry heavy stuff?
Oh, no, I love being outside, period. And, I've taken, my girls are only 5 and 3 years old, but I've taken them out on a lot of the trails that are local and stuff like that. And we may only go a half a mile, on it. We're not running it, but we're getting outside and just being able to appreciate being outside and even a little bit exposing them to the way that I grew up. Naturally kids love to be outside. So the idea of just going out on a trail, they love it. I may end up, halfway through with my youngest on my shoulders, and then it does become a workout for me. But, they love it, and we can spend hours out there, take a lunch and go out there, and they're good with it. So I find it more likely than not, obviously, always being a part of myself. And hopefully their lives too, of just being outside and enjoying it and not always trapped inside, being able to just explore.
Do you see your daughters, either one of them, showing any interest or potentially doing something like this, what you're doing with these races?
I do. So they do kids Spartan Racing. So they basically take, little obstacles and do it. My oldest has done 3 of them. My youngest has done 2 of them.
Wow.
And they love it. And it's funny how natural doing these things actually is to kids. You know, the idea of running through mud. Like, yeah,
Right.
what kid doesn't like to run through mud and get dirty, you know? And they have a natural ability to be competitive, even though I obviously don't base it at all around that. But, you know, they like to climb stuff. They like monkey bars. Mm-hmm. You know, these are all things that
they want to do.
Like to do. And so I also I appreciate it because I'm like, I am a little kid out here, you know, playing around and stuff like that. When you see it on the kid's side, you're like, yeah, that is natural to want to do.
Right.
And they love it. So kind of same thing. If they want to do it, of course, that would be amazing. If they don't want to, they don't want to. Right. That's completely fine with me either way, you know.
Just be supportive in what I'm that way with my children. I just had a conversation with them over dinner last night with some of their schoolwork that they may or may not be succeeding well at. And I just let them know all the time that whatever it is you decide that's important to you, I'm supportive of it all the way, as long as it's something healthy, constructive, and benefits you in that way. I'm with you. Like, and if you're maybe failing at one thing that, you know, the world or society or me or your mother expect you to succeed at, and you're not succeeding at it, I always kind of take a step back and think to myself, like, okay, well, maybe that's not their deal. You know, like it's not a big deal for them. So what can I support them in? I'm not too hard on like being so specific. Like, you know, if you grew up playing soccer or you grew up, you know, playing volleyball and your kids don't do it, that it's like a disappointment to you and your mother or something. Or, you know, I don't really look at it that way. I like to think I want them to find what they want to do. Mm-hmm. And if I have a huge influence and they follow in my footsteps, but that's what they want to do, I'm with them.
Absolutely.
And if it's not, then cool.
It is what it is. And my kids have, I mean, you know that every kid has ridiculously different personalities. You know, my oldest is a sweetheart and she's very caring, and then my youngest is the opposit of that. You know, her favorite color is black. Mm-hmm. She's
3.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
You know, she's going to be, you know, one of those that I don't know. It's going to be interesting, but to each their own. And I support that. You know, right. I was that kid growing up that, you know, was a little bit more off center, I guess you would say, you know, like socially not the best, had some major, you know, social issues and stuff like that. That was very uncomfortable kid.
Yeah.
But, you know, through sports and just growing up and stuff like that, because my parents supported almost anything that I wanted to do, same thing in a constructive way, obviously, that I found myself and I found comfort in who I was.
Right.
Yeah.
So speaking of climbing mountains earlier, because it's a kind of a broad metaphor for, you know, life, but also like, you know, it's reality, it's life, but it's also literal.
Sure.
Talk to me about like some of your mountains that you've climbed in life that, because you said you found the Spartan Racing 3 years ago, roughly, and then you did your first race within 6 months of finding out.
Yeah.
And so you've been on it now for a few years, getting after it and getting that done. So what's like leading up to that, like, and what was your environment before that? Because, you know, you were a kid doing your athletic stuff, and then as an adult, you kind of almost rebirthed that sort of athletic competitive spirit.
So, I mean, after college, I pretty much stopped any athletics, honestly. So for a good 10 years, I didn't do anything athletically, and basically made my life kind of based around someone else, which was my husband. And, you know, kind of worked to make a certain life and all of that sort of stuff, the quote unquote, what you're supposed to do, you know, like you're supposed to do A, B, and C in life. And these are check marks, and that's what you do for a happy life, right?
Kind of those fit into a box that's expected.
Yeah. So, I kind of lost myself in general through the course of that. So then after my second child was born, my marriage started to fall apart, and because of alcoholism and everything like that, it was a real struggle, and it wasn't a safe place for my kids to be anymore. So, I made the decision to leave, and so within a day's time, I had my car packed up, moved to my sister's. I had to quit my job of 13 years because he also worked there. Wow. So I needed to start a new job. My youngest, I needed to find daycare for because she had not been in daycare at all because we had flip-flopped schedules to where she wasn't in daycare. So I started to backtrack a little bit, I started into the Spartan Racing about a year before that to try to find myself a little bit. And through kind of some of the struggles and stuff like that, trying to get through it, but still have both sides of it. But then as I continued, with it and realizing, my kid's safety is number one, obviously. Right. And then kind of going through those struggles and realizing that I myself am strong enough to not be in that situation. That through starting on the Spartan Racing gave me that strength to realize I'm okay on my own, and I can do it on my own, and I can pass through those obstacles, to kind of go back like that side of it, that, like I'm worth it. Right. Is kind of, so building that confidence going into these races really started to build my confidence in not only myself, but who I am as a mother, what I can do and everything like that. And
some confidence.
Yeah, exactly. And, I took that into my new job that I love, and, just completely, kind of 180 what my life was about and turned it into not about what somebody told me it was supposed to be, right, but what I wanted it to be. So
you decided this is what I want my life to be, which is definitely something I think people should really ask themselves. Yeah. Okay, here's where my life is, but it's kind of I think there's also like a little bit of bravery that has to come out, that you have to be willing to admit to yourself what it is you want, because if it doesn't fit into what you've been told you're supposed to have, it kind of feels like you're doing something wrong. If you're used to doing what everybody wants you to do, admitting to yourself there's something else that matters to you and actually jumping on it and going after it, there's kind of a little bit of like maybe doubt involved for some people sometimes. Sure. But then once you get to it and you realize like, this is important to me, I think there's also a correlation between physical and mental strength. People say there's a physical, there's the mental, or it's all mental, it's all physical, and whatever you're speaking of. But I don't see a difference between the two, personally. I don't think there's a difference between mental strength and physical strength, because mental is physical. Absolutely. And physical is mental. You can't do one without the other. It's just, I think there's a difference between the mind and the body, but they're both working together. So would you say that there's like a direct impact first on getting your mind right or getting your body right? Like, is there a benefit to just say focusing on just like the athletic part and letting that work on the mind?
Well, I think the mind it's crazy what it's capable of, and how much it wants to stop your body 1,000 times before your body will actually stop. So one of my first ultra runs, that was what, talking to some people that, they go out and they run 100 miles. Yeah, it's ridiculous. Their mind is so strong though, because your mind will try to stop you so much before the body actually physically will. And so it's this fight that you have to be able to turn that off. So the mental side of it, I think, is actually the most important. Obviously, physically, you need to be physically fit, and, that's a progression. But even in working out, to be able to push yourself, to a certain point that is not comfortable. It's not comfortable to be at that level, but it makes you physically more capable, basically. And so it's, on some of like one of my 50K races that I talked about on Instagram, I was by myself for hours in the race, and just in the way of pushing yourself to the max by yourself for hours on end, not slowing down your pace, just keeping the hardest pace that you possibly can. Because I have no idea if the girl behind me is 30 seconds behind me, if she's right around the bend, or she can be 30 minutes behind me. I have no idea. And it's this mental push that you have to continually do that I think is by far the most important part of any of these races, either it be trail racing, Spartans, anything in life. I think in general, to be strong in your mind is number one.
Yeah. So how do you develop that? Like, if I want to get faster running times, or if I want to get stronger at mountain climbing, obviously you run faster and you climb more mountains.
Right.
So with the mental part of it, how do you do that? I mean, I think it's easier to inventory physical things, like your bank account or your deadlift. It's easy to inventory, but your mental state is a lot harder to inventory.
Right.
You can do it. It's just a lot more work. So how does somebody or what have you done that was a direct impact on that part of it when you see the mind kind of getting in the way?
And it's hard to necessarily say because, it's not necessarily a learned trait. It comes from, obviously, I don't know how to explain it, but I'm happy to be out there and I'm happy to be doing what I'm doing and appreciating what I'm doing and the ability to, so I can turn off the negative sides a lot easier. I feel like having kind of a positive outlook on it of, we've talked about this of people ask, like, why would you want to do that? Like, that just seems crazy. On a Saturday off, you want to go run 32 miles. Why would you? And to me, I'm like, I get the opportunity to be outside for 5+ hours, out in nature, running, doing what I love. And so mentally, it's not a battle, really. I'm lucky to be out there doing it.
Right.
And so it's not stopping my mind from the negative thoughts. Like, I'm happy to be out there, and I love it. And so I don't know if that's the switch. It's really hard. I don't know how to explain it too well, but
I think you kind of took it, because I was looking more into it psychologically, and I think which you did, but I was kind of looking more to like a different answer, but the one you gave me, I think is even better, because I think it's true, and it leads me to the idea that makes me think about the idea of, if you love what you do, you've heard that phrase, you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life, which I disagree wholeheartedly that it's inaccurate. I think it's, if you love what you do, you work absolutely harder at it and enjoy it along the way.
Yeah.
So, and also too, it's important to find things you love. Like you're saying, the mental part doesn't get in the way as much, because if you didn't love it, your brain would get in the way so often that you just won't do it. And if you actually end up doing it, it's just so much more of a struggle, and other people who, if your brain gets in the way, other people are just going to pass you right up, because they love it and their brain's not stopping them as much as yours is or hindering them. So I think that's actually the lesson there, is making sure, I'm not telling everybody they should go join. I have zero interest in doing a Spartan race, zero, but it's absolutely compelling hearing, why you do it, because I think it's also the same reason why I do a lot of the things I do is because I need it. I have to. I think there's a need, which we have talked about before. There's this need for it, and without that need, it's just too hard. And you might as well. And life's short. You might as well just do what you're enjoying to do. Why would you waste too much time doing what you didn't want to do, especially when it's your choice?
Yeah.
Even if you have to pay for it, even if it costs you a lot of money and time, and you get a little bloody, and you have to climb under barbed wire and travel around to get these things done, and probably the recovery has to be brutal. I would imagine the recovery is just absolutely, not just physically banged up, but your muscles just have to be just destroyed.
Yeah, after most races, it's not too bad. I mean, you're a bit sore. Tahoe was pretty brutal. My foot's still kind of messed up. I mean, you do that many miles, it's one of those things. It takes a wear and tear on your body, but yeah, once again, you're kind of every time I'm like, I chose to do it and I'm happy to do it and I had a blast doing it. So I'm not really hating the fact that, in with kind of the progression of working out, I love being sore. Right. Like it's one of those things because I view it as a stepping stone. If I'm not sore after I work out, then I didn't do enough.
Right.
And so I love when I wake up in the morning, I'm like, oh man, my shoulders, my arms, they hurt, and I'm like, right. Yeah, that was a good workout then. Okay, cool.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So it's just, once again, it's kind of that switch in mindset of when you do enjoy what you're doing, the negatives turn into positives, mm-hmm. if that makes sense, that it's just a different outlook on it.
Right.
And that's why I said, I won't do it anymore if I don't enjoy it.
Right.
I mean, because then it wouldn't be fun. If I'm not enjoying working out or training or racing, then I'm just not going to do it, because if my mind is not there, if my mind is not enjoying it, I'm not going to be successful. Mm-hmm. Yeah, if I'm going to do something half-assed, I'm not going to do it.
Right. So you found yourself in a situation in life with your relationship, mm-hmm. With your husband, and then and how it was affecting you and your kids, which you again didn't mention how it affected you, but you were saying how it affected your kids. I'm sure it had its toll on you too. I mean, you were the adult aware of the whole situation the whole time, where they were small. The kids are small, mm-hmm. which of course you have to. Well, Mama Bear's got to take care of the cubs, but but also you got to take care of yourself. And so you said before you got out of the relationship that you were already joining these runs and getting into this to build that strength. And I don't know if you said it specifically, but you think that deliberately, or not deliberately, but directly affected your decisions later on in that situation?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and because I started, my youngest was 3 months old when I started training for my first race, and things were already falling apart around me as I knew it, and so I guess in some way it was almost, I was preparing myself mentally to be stronger, because it was already, I hit some low spots, in the way of my confidence of myself was horrible. I mean, the value that I put in myself was pretty much zero. I mean, there wasn't really much to it. And, some of that is doing obviously of myself, some of that of the other person, when people bring you down. But I'll take ownership, obviously, of my own self, that I did that also to myself. I put myself in that situation to be brought down. Yeah. If I was a strong enough person, then I wouldn't have put myself in that situation to be knocked down.
Right.
So it was when I saw, kind of the potential break apart of what I knew, that's when I kind of started into, I need my own thing. I need to, so when I started training, like I said, my youngest was 3 months old. My oldest, was, I think, 20 months old. So coming up on 2 years old, I put him on a double stroller. I had a double running stroller. And so I'm out in Clovis running the hills of the trails and stuff like that with kids in tow. I got my hill training in, mm-hmm. pushing that thing up hills, and stuff like that. And, finding myself again, just finding in general, obviously kind of even before a quote unquote official, everything that's happening, you preemptively know what's going on in your life, mm-hmm. obviously. And when something is not right, and you can go a lot of different ways. Like I said before, I mean, a lot of people can go the opposite way and fall mm-hmm. deep, and I don't want to say victim, but you can play that side
I think
of
there's
it.
two ways in that scenario, from my experience and observing others, that there's two ways to handle pretty much anything, especially anything stressful or anything that's a challenge or devastating. That there's two ways to handle it, and there really is. It's pretty basic. You're either feeling sorry for yourself, or you get your panties out of a wad, you get the fuck up, and you get shit done.
Right.
And you just make it happen.
Yeah.
It's really hard to feel sorry for yourself when you take ownership, which you mentioned earlier. And I was actually going to ask you when you were saying that, you don't seem like the kind of person who takes, that takes the victim route, which I think is why we kind of clicked right away, because it's something I value and find, important in life, that, not playing the victim is very important, especially when you realize, like, when you're the kind of person who, you need to succeed. You got kids to live for, you got family and friends, and sometimes we have other people to live for that maybe aren't around anymore, because in honor of them, we need to succeed. Like, this is important stuff. And so, I really liked that I never picked up that vibe from you at all, that you were, play the victim route. But I think you can either do the victim thing, which, I think the victim mentality leads to depression. I don't think depression leads to victimization. I think you literally start feeling sorry for yourself. And so sadness, that's kind of how I see it, is sadness leads to you, possible depression or feeling victimized. You can feel sad. That's going to happen. Life's both up and down. But to feel sorry for yourself during that sadness, that leads to a deeper hole.
Yeah.
And I kind of use that as like hey, I might not be, today's not that great of a day, and that happens. But I'm not going to let myself go down in a rabbit hole of pity,
right?
Which it can happen. And it doesn't mean you necessarily have to say, I feel sorry for myself or poor me. You can be using other language like, this isn't the way I wanted it to turn out.
Right.
Well, guess what? It's just the way it is, the way it is.
Yeah.
It's not
Life is
change.
what it is. Yeah. And I completely agree. Like, you can take the two different sides. For me, there wasn't really an option because I don't have, my mom passed away, and, my dad's been in the hospital for 5+ months, and he's not really the sort of guy that babysits anyways.
Yeah.
But, I don't have backup. So to me, it wasn't an option of be the victim or be the hero. There is only one option, and that is to do what you have to do. There is no lay down and feel sorry for yourself.
Right.
Like, I can't. That is not an option in my brain.
Yeah.
In my brain, that's just the way that I work, is that this is the option. How do I get to that?
Right.
It's not, crap, I have to quit my job of 13 years. Poor me. Like, maybe I'll go, and I don't know, go on unemployment or figure something else out. Like, no, I'll go find a better job, and I'll go do that because that's what I need to do to provide for my kids. And there's not an option of that. And, it is what it is.
Yeah. So you got through the obstacles. You signed up for, I mean, it sounds to me like you kind of knew things were coming before you made decisions regarding your relationship. And so you prepared, you trained.
Right.
And then once it happened, you signed up. And you signed up for lots of probably quite the struggle or obstacle course is what I would call it. And so you really, this is kind of like in your DNA, like just to climb that mountain or push through the obstacles, get to the obstacle course and get to the other side, which can sound super poetic and philosophical, whatever you want to call it, but it's literal. It's part of who you are, and bringing that to the table. I mean, these signs showed up when you were a kid, right? You were competitive and you liked to get things done. You had a family unit that was supportive of it. As you got older, you were taking ownership. This is kind of painting a picture. You took ownership of the situation you were in. You weren't blaming anybody. Now, of course, there are two people involved, especially in a partnership, like a marriage or something. But you're taking full responsibility, which I think is a good sort of lesson for people to just kind of take from that. And something I definitely can see the appreciation in that. That's important to take complete ownership, and also to recognize, I'm sure you're well aware that this is really just part of who you are, and you did recognize that, later on in life, that you gotta do this. Like, this is part of who your DNA, that you have to stay on this track. Otherwise, I mean, you could we could go on all day about how crappy it feels to be off it. You lose
Right.
yourself, like you mentioned. You forget about who you are, and that's no good. That's not going to help anybody. It's not going to help your family. It's not going to help yourself. So shortly after, you started this racing and you did your first race, and then here you are, a single mother with 2 kids, raising them. Kind of like just briefly, like what is that like? I mean, for you, we kind of described the physicalness of it, kind of resembling an obstacle course. But how does that feel? That's got to be pretty rough.
I mean, it is. But the thing is that, my day is full. Most days I'm, exhausted by the end of the day, whether it be, what I fill my day with. I'm lucky enough to have a job where I make somewhat of my own schedule, so I can fit in stuff where I need to fit in. I am never, though, down on my day, though, for the most part. Everybody can have a shitty day, but like for the most part, I'm not down on it because everything that I fit into my day, I have chosen to fit into my day. So whether it be work, obviously I need to make money, and everything like that. But, on top of that, with working out, with spending time with my kids, with, any activities I do with them, my day is very full, but it's all because of things that I have chosen to fill it with. So at the end of the day, even though I'm exhausted, I'm not upset about it. Right. It's not, oh, poor me, I had to do all of this today. Well, I chose to do all of those things. I still want to crash out and, sleep for 12 hours, I don't have, but I've chosen all of these things, and I'm really happy at where my life has progressed and what I can fill my life with. I have the opportunity to not only have an amazing life with my kids, but I can do something that, my work, I do love it. And, not every day is easy, but, it is something that I do care to do. And then I get to roll around and play in mud and climb mountains and, lift heavy crap and kid. Stuff, and play that whole different side, of that. And so, in general, I can't complain.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm glad you don't complain, but I would say
I think most people don't want to hear you.
Yeah. But I think you could complain. People do, people complain. People complain a lot.
Oh, sure.
So you could complain, but you don't complain. And that's admirable. I like that a lot. It sounds.
And there's always daily stuff that can come up that, hey, if you talk to my sister, I'm sure to her I do complain.
Yeah. Well, that's what sisters are for. Right.
But in general, it can't be too upset.
Well, my sister calls me to complain. So, I'd be curious to find out if she thinks she calls me to complain or just to talk.
Yeah, so, exactly.
But
that's what you're there for.
100%. She's probably the only person I would allow on a weekly or daily basis to call me and actually have complaints, because eventually I would just tell anybody else, like, look, go find somebody else to complain to.
Right.
It ain't me.
Yeah. It's a good sounding board.
So you didn't have a lot of help. Also, I'm trying to see it this way, that it sounds to me like you signed up for this life that you currently have now in the last 3 years of making that, you don't have a lot of help. You mentioned, the position you're in regarding your mom and dad, and you don't have any babysitter help there. You don't have any, I almost kind of feel bad saying that grandma and grandpa are babysitters, because they're not, right? They're just, they're caring for your kids. Whatever, but you don't have that.
Correct.
So again, that's another obstacle. How do you deal with that? Like what kind of challenges? I'm thinking of like, a single mother out there who, and I hear this a lot, and I'm not trying to pick on people. I'm just trying to kind of paint a broad picture to people who do know that there's more to their life than they're currently receiving. And it's, maybe they just need to realize that it's in their control. Some people don't. They maybe either victimizing, feeling sorry for themselves, or they just don't quite see it.
Right.
But what kind of scenario were you in, and how do you deal with that? Or we know the scenario, but how do you deal with that scenario regarding, pretty much doing it on your own in that sort of sense as a mother and as a, working, still having your career and still having your passions and going after the things you decided are important to you. Like what kind of environment is that?
I mean, it's all weighing out what, what's important and what you need to do. I mean, it's, when I kind of first went out on my own, it wasn't the fact of like, this is what I'm choosing to do. I have to do this. I have to make money in order to pay rent. I have to do that. In order to make money, I have to find some, a daycare or somewhere to watch my kids that I feel comfortable with, it took me a little bit to find where I wanted them to be. I don't have a family friend that has, it's quite a bit of money where I ended up taking my kids, because it's a reputable place, and I felt comfortable with it. But I mean, it is, you do what you have to do sort of thing, and even before, cause my mother passed away, a month before I started training for my first Spartan race. And even previous to that, she couldn't have watched my kids. Unfortunately, she struggled with alcoholism too, which also was the reason why she passed away. So, it was something that I already kind of knew, as my life was like, I am what my girls have, and vice versa too. They are what I have, we call each other the Three Musketeers, whenever we're doing stuff, and, they're my best friends and they're a little crapheads sometimes, but I love them to death. But you do what you have to do. I don't know. Like it seems extremely
simple.
Yeah. But that's how I view it. You figure out a way. There's nobody coddling you to try to figure it out. Like there's nobody giving you ideas. You have to sit down and you have to do it.
Right. I think sometimes the best way to answer a question is the simplest answer, but with probably a very complex, process. Mm-hmm. So like you're saying it's pretty simple. You just do it, which is true. Like I've been listening to this guy's podcast for months now that I think it's been around for at least a year or so. But this guy's podcast is something I use to literally get me out of bed, because he talks about his 4 a.m. morning starts. I think it's 4:30, and he gets a lot of people questioning. He's a retired commander in the Navy SEALs, and now he's living civilian life and running a company, still being a family man, and trying. He's navigating his life really well and succeeding really well. Back here in the States after being deployed and working overseas. Retiring, he did it his whole life. Mm-hmm. And he gets this question a lot that people ask him, like, how do you get up at 4:30 in the morning every day? Mm-hmm. And you can imagine what his answer is. Like, what's the simplest answer you can give?
I do.
I'd get up at 4:30.
Right.
Like, there's no magic.
Yeah.
And I swear to you,
once you stop the question and it's just the answer.
Right.
That's it.
Yeah, it was so strange to hear that. And it was like something you already know, it's like, I am 35 years old. I'm not claiming to be super smart that I know a lot. I would probably claim the opposite, but I wouldn't think something so simple was going to catch me so off guard. And like, it was almost kind of like a rewind, like I heard a record scratch in my head and went, oh, that's how you do things. That's how I do things. So when I'm struggling at something, I have to remind myself it's simple. The answer's simple. Now, doing it's hard.
Sure.
There's technique, there's things involved, there's obstacles, of course. But signing up for it, like how would you do a Spartan race? You sign up for a Spartan race.
Yeah.
Like that's how and then you show up.
Pretty simple.
You do a Spartan race.
Yeah. Whether you sucked at it or not, like you get through it.
Right.
Yeah.
So keeping it simple, that's kind of the keeping it simple for the answer and then going through with the obstacle course. Would you think that it's kind of like you make a decision of what you want to do, and then the process itself, it seems sometimes like people say things just work themselves out, or, there's karma, or there's these things that just like happen and make your life the way it is. But I think it's kind of more you sign up for something, literally or metaphorically, you sign up for something you want to have done. And then the answers come to you as opportunities come to you.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have the end in mind, it seems like you take the right path to get there once you've made that decision of what the end is.
Right.
That's kind of how it seems to me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I feel like, opportunities we make our own opportunities, and if you go in with that mindset, then you can see those opportunities clearer, if you know you're going to do something, kind of the rest of all the fuzziness goes away and it makes that decision that much clearer because that's it. That's what you need to do. That's it.
Right. Yeah, that's kind of how I see it too is like there was a quote I like actually, which will lead me to a question later I want to ask you. I'll say it wrong, so it's going to be paraphrasing, but the definition of luck is opportunity or preparation meets opportunity. Because I do believe that there's things that like, by chance, like lucky, you could say, oh, this happened, and things came together. We got lucky. But there's most of the times in life, we have to create our own luck by being prepared for the opportunity that's going to come.
Yes.
And I think the simplest way to start getting prepared is just decide what it is you want to do or what your outcome's going to be or where you're going. What is your end result in this thing that you're trying to get done or you want to achieve? And then the opportunities come your way, but you're already prepared to answer them correctly or get through them correctly.
Right.
Because you've already made that end result clear to yourself.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
So here you are running these crazy races. You've gone through the situations you have clearly, with your relationships and with being a single mother and getting, I think most important is again, pointing out with the right attitude. When I was tattooing you months ago, that was the first thing I thought was like, I knew I wanted to start this podcast and I knew I wanted to find people that I felt like could add to, add some value to others if they were heard. And that was the first thing I noticed about you was that there was no complaining. Mm-hmm. And I grew up with a father who was exactly that way. Like I cannot tell you in the years that I've known him, he's a stepdad. He came around since I was 9, 10 years old. And I couldn't tell you one time he's ever complained. Him and my mom are still happily married over 25 years of marriage. And I really couldn't. And it's not, I couldn't even rack my brain enough to figure it out. So it's always been something I've, appreciated. But that was the first thing I thought of when I was talking to you. Is this girl's never once complained. I mean, obviously there's no value in it. Complaining.
Right. And I'm not going to say I never complained.
Right.
I would love to say that.
Right.
But for the most part, yeah. Because my viewpoint is I don't want to hear other people complain, to tell you the truth. I mean, it kind of lays down to that. So why would they want to hear me complain?
Yeah. They probably don't.
Yeah.
I don't.
So, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Nobody really wants to hear it, maybe except my sister once again.
Right.
She probably doesn't even want to hear it, but she's going to anyways.
Yeah. We got to open up, of course.
Right.
Yes. But I think, because I think that, again, going back to definitions, there's like a definition of complaining, which I was stunned to find out. A complaint is essentially just making a physical statement of any sort about something that's unsatisfactory. So like that's I'm guessing there's different levels of complaining, but there's a lot of like poor me intertwined with complaining. Like, hey, I'm unsatisfied with the way this is, but also look at the way me and it's affecting me. And it's all about you.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, the part that can take a toll.
Right.
Yeah. It's like talking to people about the way things went that weren't so great.
Yeah. And sometimes, being factual isn't necessarily complaining. Like if I'm talking about my previous year in Tahoe that I got a rock through my hand, like that's factual. I'm a little bit complaining that sucked. I didn't get to complete that race, but it is what it is. Hey, I learned.
Right. So what are some like, I'm taking like to a specific moment, let's say when the rock goes to your hand or you scrape your knee or actually almost kind of worse is the running for hours and you're kind of stuck in your head. Say the mind attempts to get in the way. You start thinking or doubting, or do you ever have these moments where it's like something's almost like a little rain cloud kind of starts to settle in and you have like, you have to experience like shutting it out, or like, do you have techniques or anything that does that?
Yeah. So once again, a ultra runner told me this. I did a 12-hour race. And one of the first things he told me is the body always comes around. And so you have those times where you're like, man, my hip hurts really bad. And your mind's saying like, yeah, no, you're probably injured. You should probably stop. Stop what you're doing. And then within a few miles, your body's fine again.
Right.
Like, because it comes back around. That was just your body saying, yeah, this hurts a little bit. I'm not saying run injured. Don't get me wrong. But so I kind of view that always. That's why I do mentally too, that I use that in my brain of if I'm at that point and I'm hurting and wanting to stop, I know it'll always come back around. I'll find another spot in that will click again, so just keep going and then we'll get comfortable again. And I don't know, even in any of my races, I've found that to be true for the most part, that I can be hurting 1 minute, the next minute I'm fine again.
Right.
Because I stopped my brain from thinking.
Right. So obviously somebody pointing that out and just an ultra
runner
pointed that out to you is very useful. So like describe to me a moment where you've had like, if you're willing, severe self-doubt in it could be in competition or just in life. Like describe that and like what happened, like what you did getting through it. Like,
yeah. And, I mean, there's been points in races where I'm running the best that I humanly can. I remember one half marathon that, I just felt like I was going as like there wasn't a possibility for me to go any faster than what I was. And this girl was still right on my heels. And I just, and I didn't have it anymore. And so I let her pass me because I was like, I've been trying my best and she's right there. I don't know how much more I have in me. And then as she passed me, something clicked that it's the competitiveness in me that it's hard to let that person go. And then, I ended up, my viewpoint was if I let her get more than 1 or 2 feet in front of me, it's going to be really hard to get it back. So keep pace with her until I have enough to get back past. And, so that's basically what I did. Stay with her. And then some hills started to come up and that's my strength. And then, so I feel like in general that, you have those points in your life where you're like, I've tried my absolute best and I just seem to be not quite there. Right. And so you take a breather and you almost slow down for a second, but then you realize, no, I'm not done.
You got some more.
Yeah, there's more in me.
And it's interesting you say that because I really, truly, by nature, I am absolutely a hermit. I think it's just that's in my DNA for sure. It's pretty relative to my family too. We are just hermits, introverts, right? Type B personality, I think they call them. I'm not sure about that part of it, but I also understand that it's important to not be an introvert, that there's, things like this, like it's just me and you. This is kind of introverty, but I understand that it's also really important to be an extrovert and share and communicate with people because I understand and recognize when it's useful when people share and communicate with me. And so why wouldn't I do that back? It's kind of a reciprocal thing. But so going to the idea that it's like, I think back and forth of, if I'm an introvert or something, or somebody else that deals with that sort of scenario, putting yourself next to other people who are faster than you or competing with you, or let's say are a little bit better than you. I think a lot of times that's how you push yourself further, is you surround yourself with people, hopefully more than the opposite. You surround yourself with people who are going to test you, because that little bit of competitiveness or just motivation or inspiration, someone might say, oh, I saw this girl doing it, so it just made me want to do it. Or you're saying like, I saw this lady passing me and made me say, no, it's not going to happen. I'm stepping up. I think that sometimes is like it is a tool. It's a great tool to use to get you to go a little further, especially if you're doing something you kind of doubt that you have anything left in you. Maybe all we need is a little push, and putting yourself in that scenario is obviously can do it. Yeah,
no, absolutely. And, on the side of the introvert and stuff like that, that's why I like to spend hours on end out on a trail and stuff like that. I mean, growing up, my first retail job, if a customer came in, it would take me about 5 minutes to say hello. I mean, like I said earlier, I was kind of an awkward kid.
Right.
You know, it's not something that's socially easy or natural for myself. But once again, it's one of those things that as life goes on, you realize that there are things that you just need to do and need to progress at, and to have the ability to be social with people is somewhat of a necessity to grow in a lot of different ways. And so it was once again one of those things that I had to learn. It took me a long and not an easy road to be like not the weird person that they say hello and I can't look at him in the eye and look the other direction and mumble.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think a lot of people we deal with that. A lot of people probably experience that. Some just a little more severe than others. And I actually don't think that it ever goes away.
Yeah.
You just get better dealing with it.
Right.
You just add to the toolbox.
You adapt.
Yeah, exactly. And you just kind of, like an obstacle, just kind of learn to get through it.
Right.
So I was going to ask you this. I think it's a little premature, but I'm going to do it anyway because it's on my brain. Do you have quotes or sayings or things? I guess it does kind of apply to the idea of like if your mind gets in the way. Is there things you tell yourself or mental processes you go through to encourage yourself, or it could be words of wisdom or anything?
I don't have any specific quotes. One thing that I always kind of tell myself that it's been worse. So enjoy it. You know, it's one of those, like there's been worse times. So you go forward and you know, that's, I think what kind of keeps it always positive in my head. You know, there's a lot of quotes out there of, you know, I don't know, working out and progression that, you know, is of course great and dandy, but it's all within you of what you push yourself to be. And, you know, I don't really play off any specific quotes.
Right. It's not like a mantra or something you tell yourself when you're running, or like a lot of people I hear.
I'd love to say yes, but no.
Yeah. But that's kind of an answer though. It's just, you know, it's been worse.
Right.
You're kind of telling yourself that, and it doesn't have to be a physical, like you're not literally thinking it's been worse, but you're remembering that's, you know, that's a thought, a space in your mind that you're aware of that it's been worse for you and for others.
Right. And
people have gone through worse.
It's, you know, it once again, it's something that I love to do. I feel lucky to be able to do it. And so, I mean, even in the times that, you know, it's hurting the worst, just knowing that like this is what I'm choosing to do. Nobody is telling me I have to do it.
Right.
This is not, I'm not doing it as a job, like to where this is how I make my money and that's the only way I could provide for my kids.
Right.
You know, like this is something I'm choosing to do. Every one of these races, I'm happy when I sign up for a race, like the euphoria that comes over, and then I'm like, oh crap, how do I get my kids watched?
Right.
Is one of those things. But so it's not, I don't really have to fight that many demons, quote unquote, when I'm racing because of that.
Right.
You know, so
what's in store for you in the near future? Like what's the next thing you have coming up?
I have 2 races in Castaic Lake, Spartan races, that are coming up in December. Couple more in January. One big race that I really want to do that I'll have to come up with the funds for, but there is a Ultra Beast in Scotland.
Wow.
That my whole family lives over there, on my dad's side. And so to go over there and not only obviously do the race, but take my kids over to Scotland and meet our family over there, and the family business is over there and everything like that. We own an ice cream truck. It's really
great.
It's really
Big
cool.
Family. Big one truck. Just one family business.
Well, it's just there's only one that's doing it anymore.
Right. Okay.
The rest of my family live in London, and they're, you know, all business, you know, sort of thing. But just to have that experience, obviously, of going over there and then getting to, most of the family has came over and visited some, but being able to just go over and have experiences in life. You know, that's one thing. Obviously I want to be successful in the races, but also these races take part in the most beautiful areas. You know, there's an Ultra Beast, you know, in Seattle, there's, you know, Montana, there's, you know, a ton of different places that they, you know, it's up mountains. So they put them in these beautiful areas. Right. And so, me obviously going forward, it's not easy for me to travel or to do those sort of races, but to just fill my life with experiences that I can look back. You know, awards are cool, don't get me wrong, but experiences are something that I think are the number one viewpoint for me that I want, because that's something that lasts a lot longer.
Right.
For me.
I have a good friend years and years ago who told me she's not interested in collecting things, but collecting experiences.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Like, I'd never heard it put that way, but I really like that because I think it's the same for me. I mean, it's all about the experience. Mm-hmm. That's why I don't think I am super competitive. I know that when I put myself in those positions, I experience it. But for me, it really is important to just get experiences out of it. I just think that's, I mean, one of my biggest dreams, it's not even that far-fetched, like some huge mystical thing, but as just to own a huge passenger van, get a chauffeur's license, and being able to shuttle people around to experience things that maybe wouldn't have the opportunity, right, you know, to do otherwise. Not necessarily people who are physically unable to, but people just maybe financially or just don't have the know-how or you know, maybe they're just not that adventurous, but they want to try it. Mm-hmm. I think that kind of stuff it's just super cool. Yeah. I like that.
Because at the end of our life, those are the things that we're going to look back on and remember. Right. You know, I'm not going to remember me spending X amount of hours at work or, you know, once again, we have to do what we have to do to make our lives, you know, but that's not what I'm going to look back on. Hopefully I'll be old and, I don't know, wrinkly and look back and be like, hey, cool, I did that, yep. X, you know, Y, and Z.
Yeah, and then your family can look back on it too, and, you know, your kids, your girls, to look back and be like, that was my mom. Like, right. That was so badass of her. Right. Like, how cool, you know? It's really cool. And I've always kind of had this, it's not a quote. It's kind of, again, sort of just a thought that I have in my head that, I like the idea of taking away anybody's excuse to complain. That really is like kind of part of my MO is like, I want to do my best to literally like speak to somebody and at the end of the conversation, have them be able to not say anything in reference to complaining or why they can't. And in doing that, we have to share of, you know, stories of how we've gotten through the things we've gotten through and how, you know, what it is that we do, techniques, all the way down to just reasons why. I think, again, the end result, the end goal is important. People say it's not the destination, it's the journey. Well, you're right, but the journey doesn't happen if you don't have a destination.
Right.
It just doesn't. So you don't have to prize the destination, but it's absolutely necessary in the journey. And we forget that. Some people think life's just this sort of free-for-all, just go through it and see what happens. I mean, how well would that work if you didn't know where you were going and where the finish line was? Right. In a literal and sort of non-literal sense.
And we can make our little finish lines too. Like, it's not like once you cross one finish line, there's not another one. Right. You know, there's and daily. Have a progression, you know, in things. But having a goal in mind, I think, is what a lot of people kind of get stuck in. Like, that's where I think a lot of depression happens, honestly, when you don't have something to thrive or towards, right. Then you get stuck in the, you know, monotony of life that can be your day-to-day, you know, occurring things. And that's when, you know, it's just, life sucks if right. You're just, there's nothing that you're striving for and there's no progression in life, then yeah, it's hard to find happiness within that.
It's hard to get out of bed.
Yeah.
If there's not a reason, it's hard to get out of bed if you don't have those things.
Right.
Right. Which is what a goal, you know, some people think you just, and I shouldn't say some people, I've grown up tend to think that like you have to have goals because it sounds fancy. Like you're supposed to have goals. Okay. What does that mean? Well, what it means is it's a signpost or it's a literal target you put out somewhere so that your brain can conjure up ways to achieve it. You know, that's kind of what it's supposed to be. And you're right. It could be daily. I think it's actually really important to think about it daily. Like what's your goal for today? What do you need to happen? And there could be broad ones like, what do I want to be able to feel like at the end of every day? Like what's important to me to have a good day? Like what does that mean? But also like what's important today to really have to get done that if other things get pushed aside, I can still feel successful and happy with the, the accomplishment. And then weekly, monthly, and so on. I think it's important to have those. So important that I do agree. I think without it, it can severely lead to depression or sadness or self-pity or loathing because it's easy to not be able to inventory what you've been doing. And you might be doing well, but if you didn't choose that this is what you wanted to do, you might, or you're just unsatisfied with what you're doing because it's actually not your choice or
if it's somebody else's goals or you're doing it for someone else and it's not for you, then you can have resentment. You can have, I've seen that with couples before that it's, either he or she makes the money for this, but it's not because it's that what they want to do or, and stuff that it has to be internal. It has to be something that you care for. And like you touched on earlier, the people say like, love what you do, don't work a day in your life is kind of BS. I think that, every day is work. We work towards our goals, but we appreciate the journey and appreciate the end result that much better because we worked our ass off to get there.
Yeah.
Every day that there is that little progression. And then once you get it, there's that big sigh of and appreciation of like, oh shit, I did that.
Right. Yeah. And then we literally find those and sign up for them and pay good money to be able to show up to the starting line so that we can experience that.
Right.
Because I think that's just part of human DNA. It is. And it's very valuable for people to realize like if they don't get to, some people might be listening thinking, oh, well, that's her. Great for her. She gets to do those things or proud of you and pumped that you get to do that. But they might not be thinking like, that's not for me. Well, maybe the ultra beast isn't.
Right. Or maybe, and there's not very many people that do it. Yeah. And so, not something that I always recommend to people.
But that process.
Right.
Right. The finish line is important. And to deliberately and consciously decide, this is my finish line. And again, back to for every day, every month, every year, at the end of your life or whatever it might be, you should have these because, that's a good way for you to inventory how you feel or how you've been doing and your progress. And also it directly affects how you feel about yourself. I think we all know what it's like to sleep in a little too long, be a little too lazy, and you are so dissatisfied with your activity. Right. You're like, what have I done? You almost just want to get up and run out the door and do something because you've done nothing.
Right.
For me, it's literally could just be sleeping in a few extra hours. I'm like, oh no, what have I done?
Wasted that time.
Yeah. Geez, I'm so disappointed in myself. But maybe that's a little extreme to some people, but it's not to me. I literally can be disappointed in myself just for I get to this point in myself getting sick. So I'm like a week I did nothing and I canceled on all my appointments and I just feel so dissatisfied that I almost feel like I have to work even harder, which doesn't help me to recover sometimes.
Right.
But it's, that's off the subject a little.
No, it isn't because it's just when that's your normal daily life and to stray from it, like when you push so hard and then you pull back or you stop a little bit, then it seems odd to you, with working out. I'm kind of that way of, it's just such a natural thing for me now. Like it wasn't 3 years ago. Like I wasn't in shape whatsoever. I, was not the smallest person in the world. I definitely had extra weight and all of that sort of stuff. Now it's just such a normal course of my week that if I was to stop or had an injury or something like that where I had to pull back on it, that would be my weird point.
Right. Not
the point of working out, of if I had to pull back on it, be like, wait a second, what? No, what are you doing to me?
Yeah. So if we could leave somebody listening with something that, because I think we've touched on a lot of really amazing points, and again, a reason why I wanted to speak with you here is that I think we also come from a similar place of like understanding, just stop complaining, zero complaining, because it doesn't serve you. It's not going to get your job done. Hard work is absolutely incredibly important. To enjoy what you're doing, and just what you enjoy, what you're signing up to do is even more important, because that'll determine how much hard work you're going to be willing to put in and for how long. And also just because you need to be enjoying it, because your life is an important thing. It's a short amount of time that we're here, and it's up to us to decide what we're going to do with it, and put those goals in place so that we can so we can conjure up the ways to get the things done we've decided intentionally that are important to us, daily, weekly, and yearly. So what would you say to people, like say somebody in a position where they're maybe doubting themselves? I do hear that a lot in conversations with people, that they're just, I don't think they believe in themselves.
Right. And I think that's the key right there.
Yeah, they don't believe. So like what would we say to the, somebody in that position that they kind of feel like there's something out there for them that they want to do, and they just don't have maybe they just don't have the self-confidence to get through it? Like what could be
I mean, it comes down to, you are capable. Everyone is capable. I'm not saying go out and do a Spartan race or, obstacle course race in general. Like I'm not even saying in the way of working out or anything. Just in general, you are capable of, you can set your goals, and, whether it be a lofty goal, but have goals in between, of it. But we are capable of so much more than we give ourselves credit for. I've spent a lot of years in self-doubt, doubting my capabilities in a lot of different ways, way before I even knew about Spartan racing, and stuff like that. But knowing I'm in control of my life, and that I am capable of making it happen how I see fit.
Right. I think that's great. I 100% agree. I think that's the best way to look at it, is you are capable. 100%. Like, decide what it is. And the level of that capability, again, it's not a comparison. Another thing I've learned from a good friend of mine is that, you don't have to compare.
Right.
Somebody's like what you're doing, what they're doing, how they're doing it. Just because somebody's really rich and loves it and telling you to be rich doesn't mean you have to sign up to be the same level of financial, gain that they have. Or, somebody doesn't have to be as attractive as the other person to feel good or beautiful about themselves, or run as far or as fast. I have a friend, actually the same friend who mentioned that to me, that does Spartan races and doesn't do it to compete at all with anybody, probably other than herself, if you would even say that. I think she just gets out of it what she's explained to me is the experience, and just getting through it, and feeling good about that.
And in the community, I've came to know a lot of different racers, and one of my very good friends, he never compares himself to anybody else. It's his journey. He started from, quite a bit overweight, and where it'd be hard for him to run a 5K, and he's progressed to now, running Spartan Elites, and just recently did the 50K that I did, which is 32 miles on a trail. And it's not about him compared to other people. Like, no, he's not competing for, a top 20 finish in the Spartans. Right. That'd be very difficult. But his progression from him, from what he was a year, 2 years ago, to now what he's capable of doing.
Right.
The fact that he could complete 32 miles on a trail, like that itself, that's a feat to do. Absolutely. And it wasn't about speed. It wasn't about anything else other than for himself, he was able to complete that.
Right. And that's exactly all we're talking about here is you on your terms, you decide what's important, you figure it out, you get it done, and you gain, and you achieve the things you've set out to achieve.
Right.
And that's what it leads to. So I'm thinking, you say you have some races coming up. It's every year they do the World Championships?
Yeah.
Do you plan on doing next year's?
Yes.
So we're going to have to do a follow-up.
Okay.
You know that, like, truly. I mean, I know I'll see you again in the meantime, but I had a lot of fun doing this. I really
Hopefully I don't do worse then.
Yeah, no, I don't think you're going to do worse because we're telling everybody right now that you're going to do it again and follow up. So you're going to have a little bit more motivation, maybe.
Crap.
Yeah. So if not, maybe we'll just forget that this ever happened. Maybe I'll
everybody will forget in a year. Yeah, it's fine.
Except for your kids and grandkids.
Right.
So yeah, this has been a lot of fun. I thank you so much for doing this with me.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. It's been awesome.
I would really like to do it again, truly. We might not have to wait a year, but if you're going to do the next championship, then if we do that, we definitely will have a follow-up.
Okay.
And how about this? If you place,
okay,
we'll do a follow-up.
Okay, deal.
A little bit of motivation.
Okay.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right.